This is Twit.
Rumors were correct. Microsoft Edge is going to become a Chromium-based browser.
That was huge.
Right.
Or huge, as the case may be.
Huge.
That was huge.
It was huge, you guys.
So is that Microsoft throwing... You didn't talk about this last week. This happened after the show, right?
So we talked about the rumors about it,
they confirmed
but
it.
not the actual happening, which was the day after Windows Weekly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it thrown in the towel? I guess it is. They even said it kind of is. We give up.
Yeah. It is.
Well, but it is, but I think to the right cause, right? This isn't, we made this product nobody used and we're not going to make it anymore. It's, maybe this isn't the right place to innovate on the web with a rendering engine. And this is a thing that people still are kind of arguing about. But, the way we had described it last week was that, Microsoft, like any other browser maker, can innovate at the application level, which is, I think, the appropriate place to do it, not at the web standards level.
Well, and that's one argument for this is this is good for PWAs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Electron apps and...
Yeah, and they own GitHub, which created Electron, and so now that means Electron. But somebody said yesterday, I thought this was interesting, as the Chromium engine is a forked version of WebKit. It's called Blink.
Right.
Why not choose WebKit? Then you would be, because WebKit's on iOS, WebKit's on Mac.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, Chrome used to be WebKit until they forked it not so long ago.
I think they wanted to go with the standard, de facto
Here's
standard.
what I don't like about that, and this is funny, but it's true. It makes it a monoculture.
It does.
It gives Google more power.
But again, I think that's where the monoculture needs to be, right? We're not all using the same application,
right?
Although 2/3 of people on the web are using Chrome. We're using the rendering engine and the JavaScript engine, the other things that make up Chromium. But I think that's the right place for that to be, because calling it a monoculture, is has this negative connotation to it, right? It's like the
bananas.
Word bias. Not like bananas, unless you don't like bananas.
Well, bananas are a monoculture, and that means disease can wipe them out.
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean. It's a negative.
That's the negative connotation, but I think that's true in a browser in a sense, right? Because that means any exploit of Chromium will be now even more broadly spread.
But any standard is a monoculture. That's the positive way to look at it is this is a standard.
It's a standard.
So the problem, Leo's familiar with all of
it's not a standard set by the W3C. It's a standard set by a corporation, or is it because it's open?
It is open source.
Yeah,
open source. Yeah. Technically, Microsoft could fork Chromium.
Right.
But that would kind of defeat the purpose in a way of going to Chromium. Right?
By the way, if that happens, something went horribly wrong.
Exactly.
So Chromium is the open source project upon which Chrome is based.
Correct. Yeah. And a lot of other browsers, not just
anything
Chrome.
with Electron is based. And if you use Linux, you can download Chrome, but you can also download Chromium as a browser itself.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you can get Chromium on Windows.
I presume you can, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between Chrome and Chromium?
Google tracking, probably.
No, Chromium does the tracking too.
Adobe, what's in there? Something from Adobe is in Chrome that's not in Chromium.
Oh, patent encumbered stuff might be in Chrome.
Yeah. There are differences between the two. But I go back to, I agree with Paul on this, that I think they had to throw in the towel because developers weren't testing for Edge because it wasn't based on Chromium. And the result was there were many JavaScript heavy pages and sites that wouldn't work correctly and sometimes almost at all in Edge.
It's also a lot of, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, what good's a browser, even if it's the most standards compliant browser, if people don't use it? And
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a lot of effort and money and resources directed at something that the end user never benefits from unless you do it perfectly, and then they don't notice. It's a terrible thing to have to work on if it's unnecessary. And I know, for Microsoft, because there's a mentality there that they make things and we've always done it this way. And This is not the right place for them to be expending effort. And it's easier for developers if there's a single or at least a couple of targets to hit rather than dozens, which, like Mary Jo said, they're not doing anyway because Edge has 3 or 4% usage share. So why bother?
Yep.
Will they?
But the other thing, Leo, did you hear? You probably heard this. They're also bringing Edge as part of this to Windows 7, 8.1, and the Mac.
Yeah.
Which
it's already on iOS and Android, but now it'll be on Macintosh too.
There's also a small hint it might even come to Linux, which is kind of crazy. They never said that, but yeah, because if you look at the way they worded it, they said we're going to bring it to other platforms too, like Mac OS.
True. That's true.
It's a subtle hint, I know, and I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but it's a possibility.
Here's
go
ahead.
Yep. Well, I was just going to this real quick. I mean, I think there is a market, especially in this space and time, for a version of Chrome that has the Google stuff removed. And that's something Microsoft could do. I know Opera does it. Brave is a really small company. They do it. There are other companies, I'm sure, that base their browsers on Chromium.
And there's, of course, all these Electron apps as well, which are basically a Chromium built into an app to provide, so the app is JavaScript and HTML. What happens to Edge? I use Edge as my default PDF reader in Windows. What happens to that? Because Chromium does not have those. That's one of the proprietary things I think that Google might add, but Chromium doesn't have. I guess Microsoft could keep its renderer.
So they're not keeping the rendering engine in the browser. They're actually keeping Edge HTML and the Chakra JavaScript engine for apps, but they're not keeping them for the browser. So they're not completely just killing them. But they also hinted that they're going to take some things from the current version of Edge and make them, or at least try to get them adopted as part of Chromium. And then they can also add their own Chrome with a small c on top of Chromium, right?
That's what you do if you're a good open source user, is you contribute back, and Microsoft said they are going to do that. So that means now both Google and Microsoft will be contributing back to the Chromium project.
And I think this is the key. This is the key thing. And for the people who are afraid of what this means in a negative way for Microsoft or Edge, I would just say there's no reason that the version of Edge based on Chrome can't look and work exactly like the one we have today. So if you're worried about that stuff, I'm not saying it will happen, but it's likely it will just, for continuity purposes. I'm not saying anyone is, but some people obviously no.
There are some features in Edge people like you just mentioned, the PDF reader.
PDF reader is a big one,
Yeah.
No, but there's no reason that can't happen. And so what's going to be interesting is the division between what they can or will add back to Chromium, which will benefit all browser makers who use Chromium, and then what they use on Edge specifically, which will be their differentiators, the things that make Edge, Right. And so we don't know what that line is. So you asked about PDF, for example. It's unlikely that will be added back to Chromium, but it's a certainty they'll add it to Edge.
Right. The only thing negative I can see at all is this notion that it's more of a monoculture. But there's still, it does kind of box Apple in, because Apple is using its own platform.
Right.
So
and
if there is a standard, a de facto standard, they're not part of it.
And they, by the way, Firefox, which I mentioned in the notes, is another issue, because they're the other major browser maker that has a years-long effort to create their own rendering engine. They've done various things to make it standards compliant, whatever. But I actually think both of those companies are going to have to eventually come around to the notion that they need to be on Chromium. And I know that's a big negative sticking point for a lot of people, but the rationale behind that is that for the same reason it doesn't make a ton of sense for Microsoft. It's not really going to make a ton of sense for them either. It's just the wrong place to innovate. And it creates confusion and difficulty in work for developers.
Right.
Because if those are the three, now you have three things you have to worry about. It's like the old days, this site best viewed on IE or whatever.
Oh God, remember that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. This is what creates that, and so
I have to think companies that make Chrome extensions are going to be thrilled. They don't have to.
Yes.
Although Chrome extensions kind of worked on Edge in the past anyway, right?
But for users, it's a big deal. How many extensions are on Edge today? Dozens at most.
Not that many. Yeah.
How many are on Chrome?
Hundreds, thousands.
More?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So
actually,
it
is probably a good thing, as long as the standards bodies can, kind of, make sure that it maintains standards. I guess one single browser standard would probably be a good thing.
Well, I mean,
and they'll be more likely, if there are flaws, which there will be, everything has flaws, to get fixed.
Right.
Because everybody's using it and everybody's working on it and everybody's trying to keep it.
The other thing is this will benefit Windows, which I think might ultimately be the real point. Leo mentioned PWAs. I think that's a big deal. Mary Jo mentioned this notion that Edge HTML and the web view that developers use in apps today is going to continue, and that's true. But side by side with that, they're also going to offer this Chromium thing. So developers who, with less popular apps or apps that they don't want to update, we can just leave it on Edge HTML. That will continue working. It's fine. But for people who want to move forward to the future, or developers who are making new apps, especially new web apps, they're going to want to target Chromium now, not Edge HTML. And so those things will exist side by side. And I bet we see a big exodus, frankly, in any.
Well, now there's momentum for sure.
Yeah, I just don't see any reason for any developer to hold back and stick with Edge HTML once this is implemented. Once it happens.